click your own.
I have been told that the Eskimo wolf hunters have a very special way that they hunt wolves. I've never hunted a wolf, so I really don't know exactly how I would do it. But from what I understand, the Eskimos do it just a little bit different way than you would expect. During the day, some of these Eskimos will go out and they will kill a small animal of some sort, maybe for a lunch or something like that. They'll have a squirrel or a rabbit, something like that. They'll drain the blood. And I don't want to get too grotesque on this, but it goes with what we're talking about. They'll drain out the blood, and they take a big long knife, a knife with a long blade on it, and they'll dip it in the blood and lay it out in the snow and let the blade kind of get covered and coated with blood and then get it freeze on there. Then they'll take that knife and they'll put it back in that same dish, and they'll put several coats of that on there by laying it out and letting it freeze on the blade. Well, at night, before they go to bed, they'll go out and they take that knife and they stick the handle down into the ground, and they cover the handle with snow, and they leave the blade sticking up out of the ground, and they go to bed. Well, during the course of the night, the wolves are out, and they're hungry, and they're looking for easy prey, and they're looking for anything that they can get, and they get a whiff of what's on the end of this blade. And it draws their attention because they're hoping to find a wounded animal or something like that. So they will move in and they'll get closer and closer, and as a pack, they will surround this smell. And they can't really tell what it is, but they can see and sense that there's something there. So they'll start moving in closer, and as they circle around as a pack around this knife sticking them out of the ground, one of them will kind of step forward to get a little bit closer to see if it moves or see if there's any action from it. And then it'll step back. And then finally, after several minutes of circling around this blade, one of them will go up and lick the blade. Well, what happens is because of the snow, because of the cold, their tongue is numb, and they don't feel any pain whatsoever. But as they begin to lick this blade, because of the flavor, because of the taste, because of what it is they're getting from it, they continue to lick the blade until all of the blood is gone. And the next morning, the Eskimos will come out, and there'll be a dead wolf laying beside a knife sticking up out of the ground. I've never done this. I don't know if it's true. I've read about this, but it makes a lot of sense. Because the idea is sometimes we get ourselves looking for what we want. We get ourselves concentrating in a direction, and we get too close to something, or we get close to something and we don't feel any pain. We don't feel like it's hurting us, and it becomes something that we kind of lose control over. Temptation is one of those things that everybody deals with. Temptation is one of those things that if you are here and you are breathing, you're dealing with it. You've dealt with it in the past and it's beat you. You've lost to it. You've dealt with it in the past and you've walked away victorious. You've dealt with it before and you felt guilty over it. You've dealt with it before and you felt great about it. You've prayed about it. You've talked to people about it. You have worried about it. You have things that go on concerning temptation all the time. And it comes from different directions, and it looks different, and it's shaped different, and it's packaged different. But if you're here, then you deal with temptation. And also, if you're here, you've heard sermons on temptation. You've heard lessons about temptation, and you know the passages, and you know the verses, and you know what's right, and you know what's wrong, and you know how this works. But I want to look at it tonight from just a little bit different direction. I want to look at it from the standpoint of what God wants in temptation. Now, we know, according to the book of James, that God can't be tempted and He can't tempt you. So if you have a temptation in your life, God is not doing that to you. We're going to look at that. But the thing that we have to hold up in this whole discussion is God wants you to be successful. God wants you to be clean. God wants you to be pure. God wants you to win in every single temptation scenario, every point of impact, every decision that needs to be made where there's a temptation involved in it. God wants you to be successful. I think sometimes we forget that. Maybe it's because there's a low point in our life, or maybe there's something where things aren't going like I want them to go, or things don't feel the way I think they ought to feel. And sometimes we tell ourselves, well, maybe God's not watching, or maybe God doesn't care, or maybe I deserve this, or maybe, you fill in the blank. We come up with all these excuses, and we find ourselves doing something that we would never thought. Some are extreme, some are not extreme. Some are big, some are... Temptation is just such an interesting thing to look at because there's so many directions to come from. But I want to start in the book of James, because what I want to do is I want to talk about some connections with this word temptation. There's this word test that comes up when we talk about temptation. The word test is a word that God uses about things that He's trying to use to make us stronger. But then there's the word temptation, and the word temptation deals more with trying to make us mess up, trying to lure us away, trying to hurt us. And sometimes they can look like the exact same thing. Sometimes they can feel the exact same way, but the intent is totally different. Now, in the book of James, when the original audience reads this book, this letter that's being sent, he's writing to some really, really good people. You look at some of the letters that Paul writes, you look at some of Peter's letters, there's a lot of warnings about bad teaching, false teaching, about bad people coming in. There's a lot of warnings and things like that. There's a lot of correction in several letters. James, it was the first New Testament book written, he is really writing to some good people. Let me give you the audience that he's talking to kind of understand why this introduction as he begins this book, why this seems to stand out so much. He's talking to people who came to Jerusalem. They came to Jerusalem in what we call Acts chapter 2. They came as Jews. And they came to worship God because that's what they always did. And then when they got there, some things started happening. There was this wind that came through town. It ended up in a room. We all crowded in to see what was going on. These men came out. Their hair was on fire, but they weren't burning. It reminded them of the burning bush. They knew of this. And then all of a sudden, there's a man up there talking. And these men who don't seem to be as educated as I would expect for them to be, and they obviously they're speaking languages that's not where they're from, but they're talking in these languages fluently, and we all are understanding them, and they're talking about Jesus, and there's all these things that are going on. And these were the ones, the audience of the book of James, these were the ones who said, you know what? There's something to this. I want to learn more about this. These are some of the 3,000 that were baptized in Acts chapter 2. These are some of the ones that were baptized a little bit later. So when they're converted in Jerusalem, they've now got to go back home. They've got to settle their accounts because they are no longer Jews. They're being kicked out of their family. They don't have a birthright anymore. They don't have an inheritance anymore. They have been completely pushed out of their family, but they had to go back, and they had to settle these things. And then they sold their land, they sold possessions, and they moved to Jerusalem. And then when they moved to Jerusalem, they found this group of Christians, and they became a part of them. They got jobs. They had the money from the lands that they had sold. We learned about this because of Barnabas and Ananias and Sapphira. They had this money, and they're laying it at the apostles' feet voluntarily. Peter said, it's your money, you can do what you want to with it. But they were voluntarily taking care of one another, and they had bought in to this new life. They had bought into this new system, and they had become entrenched in being Christ-like, being Christians. Well, now persecution in Jerusalem is stepping up a little bit. Things are getting a little bit worse. We thought this was going to be easy. I mean, we've already gone through the hard part. We had to go back home, and we had to tell our family that we were leaving. We had to tell our family that we weren't Jews anymore. Well, that we weren't going to, be under the old law anymore. We had to go tell our family that we were heretics, basically, and we had to have the arguments and have the fights. And now we finally got here. We've settled down, and we're having families, and things are going well, and it's peaceful. And you told me Jesus was coming back. I thought Jesus was coming back. You told me He died on the cross. You told me He raised from the dead. You told me that He was coming back. He's not come back yet. Where is He? Now this persecution starts happening. And there's Saul who's doing this. The predecessors to Saul really is who James is writing to, but they have to disperse. And it wasn't like an orange where they just hit it and it just kind of spurted out. They apparently organized groups and sent these groups. You would have a group that might have farmers, they might have blacksmiths, they might have doctors, they might have teachers and all these kind of things, because they weren't just going to send them out. They had thousands of people. There was a lot of organization going on, and they sent them out and they put them in certain places. And they got there and they finally got settled down again. They finally had gotten kind of normal. Things were okay for a little bit, and then that started getting rough. Okay, so we've given up basically everything because we believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And then James, the brother of Jesus, half-brother of Jesus, he writes this letter. And he uses some words right here at the beginning that, if, in all honesty, if you put yourself in the situation, if you put yourself in the place of the original audience, you probably didn't like this letter the first time you heard it. Because we've already been patient. We've already given up everything. We've already faced temptation. We've already dealt with all this stuff. And then James begins by saying this in verse 2, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials." What? I thought you were going to tell me that you were coming to help. I thought you were telling me you heard that Jesus was coming back. I thought you were going to tell me that something different than, hey, be excited, it's hard. That doesn't seem like the right thing to hear when you've left everything twice now, and all you want to do is settle down and just be a person who is a member of the church and just raise your family. And so he says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Then let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect or mature and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." Let him ask in faith. And you know that the first part of this, the idea is they're sitting there going, wait just a second. You're telling me I'm supposed to be excited about the situation I'm in. Well, the word testing is used there. It appears that God puts things at different times into our lives, or providentially puts us in situations in hopes that we will respond correctly to them and become better followers of His. That's what it appears. Now, can I put my finger on every single time that it happens? It's kind of like trying to define providence and say this is 100% providential. That's hard to do. You can say, well, I think it is. It could be. It probably was. There might be some things that you would say are providential. But as they're going on, it's hard to really put your finger on it and say, yes, God is doing this. But there is something about God where He says, okay, I might put you in a tough situation. I might put you in a hard situation. I might put you in a situation where you've got to deal with something that you've never dealt with, and I want you to deal with it correctly. I want you to succeed. I want you to be better. Well, now you fast forward just a little bit in this same introduction where he's talking about again, they probably didn't like this. If you read it from their perspective, this was tough to hear. But now in verse 12, he says, "Blessed is the man who endures temptation." So we've gone from, hey, testing of your faith produces patience. Get excited about how hard things are. Like, rejoice in the fact that things are difficult because God is using those to make you better. But now he uses a different word. He goes in verse 12, "Blessed is the man who endures temptation." For when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires and enticed. And then when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, brings forth death. Don't be deceived, my beloved brethren. Okay, you know that passage, right? Well, let's talk about it for a second. So this idea of testing, there are certain things in our lives that God somehow does, providentially or whatever, in hopes that we will become better because of it. But then there are these things called temptations. And they may look the exact same. They may even be the same scenarios. But the goal of them, their purpose, is failure. And then our self-control comes in that. That's where we play in this, because we find ourselves in a scenario. And in this scenario, God's either put me here because he wants to make me better, or some other situation has been brought to me that puts me in this situation, and I'm supposed to handle this right. But I'm going to be drawn away by the things that I want. I'm going to be drawn away by the things that I desire. And it's at that moment that I have to decide, what do I want to do? How do I want to have handled this? I'm not saying that testing and temptations are the same thing, but in the discussion we have to at least talk about them. So let's give a scenario here. So I love chocolate chip cookies. All right, chocolate chip cookies are like my love language. You know, like I love chocolate chip cookies. And my wife has honed in the chocolate chip cookie. Okay, she's got it. I mean, I don't know what she does, but those chocolate chip cookies that I think she kept manna. She must have found some manna from the desert or something, and she sprinkles, I don't know what she puts in them, but I know that she'll get out a block of special butter that we don't get to use on our potatoes. You know, like it's a special butter, and she puts it under a glass, and she puts that glass like a light over it, and she makes it just right, and then she sprinkles pixie dust and love in it. I don't know, but what comes out is a chocolate chip cookie that I can't resist. Like, I love them. I absolutely love these things. And so let's say that I go on a big diet. All right. Let's say I've decided I've sworn off of chocolate chip cookies for a month. And she's wanting to help me with that. So she decides that she is going to make some chocolate chip cookies, and she's going to put them out on the counter in hopes that it will strengthen my resolve. In hopes that as I walk by, I look at those and I say, no, I'm not eating your chocolate chip cookie. You get that thing away from me. They smell up the whole house. I mean, it's phenomenal. But she makes those this particular time, and she says, I want him to deal with the pressure. I want him. He's made up his mind. He's committed himself to losing weight. I'm going to put a couple of these out here, and I'm going to hope that it will help him so that when he's at the next fast food restaurant, he'll make the right decision. If he can get in the habit of making the right decision, then it'll be better for him. Well, then I come along and I see the cookies. Well, now temptation is happening, right? Now I see what I want. I see what I desire, and I've got to make a decision here. I can use that as a time to become better, or I can do something that won't be that big of a deal, right? I'd probably talk my way out of that one. Well, there's just nothing I can do about it. I had to eat that cookie. Well, self-control is what really is a part of all this. And self-control is hard to define, because is self-control seeing something that you want but not wanting it, or seeing something that you want and not participating in it? Do you see what I mean by that? One is seeing something that you know is wrong or whatever and not even wanting it. The other is seeing it and wanting it but not doing it. There's an idea there that there's a growth in self-control, where we go from seeing things that we want and not doing them. And the more we do that, the stronger we become, so that when we see them, we don't even want them. That's the goal of a Christian, right? Is to see something that they might have wanted previously in their life, and they've become so strong, self-control-wise, that they are disgusted by it. They don't even want to have anything to do with it. So these things work together because things that we can't define. I don't know if it was God who put the chocolate chip cookies out or the devil who put the chocolate chip cookies out. I don't know if it was meant for me to be stronger or meant for me to become weaker. I don't know which one it is, but I do know that I need to be willing to identify this problem. I need to be able to say, this is a choice with significant consequences, one way or the other. And we know that temptation doesn't come from God, but it comes really from three different directions. Our assumption is that the devil is behind all temptation. The devil made me do it. The devil is behind all temptation. I don't believe that that's true. I think the devil is behind some temptation, but James says that we're drawn away by our own desires and enticed. So not only is Satan behind some temptation in my life, I'm behind some temptation in my life. Sometimes it's something that without the devil having any part of it whatsoever, I pursue something that I shouldn't. That is also a source of temptation. But other people can be a source of temptation for us. When we're with other people or around other people, we see other people doing things. You've heard that all your life, right? So the source of temptation can come from a lot of different directions. The key here, and this is what James is telling them, look, y'all are going through a lot. You're just trying to be normal. I understand it. It's been a whole lot. But this stuff, if you handle it right, will make you better. But do not give in to the things that you know you shouldn't give into. Because I want you to remember what we said already. God wants you to be successful in the moment of decision. God wants you to be successful in the moment of decision. Every single time, God wants you to be successful in the moment of decision. So that means we have to go to the book of 1 Corinthians. And we have to look at chapter 10 and verse 13. I remember when I was in high school, our Bible class teacher gave us a little chart. And it had Matthew 1 and 2, and it had two little lines beside it. And you would check if you read it, and you would check if you said a prayer. And then it'd say Matthew 3 and 4, and you'd check if you read it, and check if you said a prayer. Matthew 5 and 6, and I don't know why, because I'm not a big reader, but I decided I was going to go all the way through the New Testament. I felt like that was something I needed to do. It wasn't very hard. So every night right before I go to bed, I'd pull my Bible out. I'd read 2 chapters. I'd underline the verses that seemed to make sense to me. I'd write down any questions I might have. I'd say a quick prayer. I'd check them off. And I made it all the way through the New Testament. I remember at first starting in Matthew going, that's a lot of names. I don't know if I'm going to get very far into this, you know. And then getting into the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of red letters there. Well, I don't really know what to underline. I really don't know what to pay attention to. I guess I should just probably familiarize myself with it. Getting through the book of Acts, I mean, as a younger guy, that was a hard read because it was a lot of history. And to be honest with you, I don't like history. But I'm reading through it. I remember getting to 1 Corinthians 10:13. I remember as a sophomore in high school getting to 1 Corinthians 10:13, and I went, I'm going to need this verse. There's something special about this verse. I'm going to need this one. And I remember it being the second verse that I ever memorized on my own. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 8, the grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of our God stands forever, was the first verse that I said, I think I kind of need to know that, and I memorized it. 1 Corinthians 10:13 was the second verse that I said, I'm memorizing this one. I need this one. And you probably have it memorized too. But what's interesting about the passage is the context. The book of 1 Corinthians has 2 sections in it. If you're ever reading through the book of 1 Corinthians, you'll see it changes around chapter 4 into chapter 5. And what we understand about the book is that Paul had been in Corinth for a year and a half. He'd been there 18 months. And he had left. And he had received a letter, because he mentions Chloe at the beginning and he mentions Stephanas at the end. And it appears as though that he got a letter from this lady named Chloe that said, Paul, we're really divided. Like, since you left, there's all kinds of division here. There's this division of some are saying that, hey, well, I'm going to do it the way Peter said do it. Well, I'm going to do it the way, Jesus said do it. I'm going to do it the way Apollos said do it. Some are saying, Paul, they're just going to do it the way you said do it. We need some help. And so he sits down and he starts writing the first part of 1 Corinthians because it's all about unity. About, y'all got to be unified. The four of us that you're trying to divide up over, we're the one. But then it changes. And so what the commentators and all these people a whole lot smarter than me believe is that while he's writing this first part of 1 Corinthians, he gets another letter with a list of things that are dividing them. Because starting in that next chapter, in chapter 5, he goes into these, what we call the now concerning passages. And the now concerning is it's like he's responding to something. So there seemed to be a list of questions that were handed to him, to him, that got mailed to him, where he says, okay, let me start answering these. And there was things about suing a brother. There were things about a marital situation. There was that situation where there was immorality that was so grotesque and everybody was kind of puffed up about it. And he said, why are you letting this happen? And he starts answering these questions. They talk about the Lord's Supper was dividing them. And one of the things that was dividing them, because the Corinthian church was a mixture of Jews and Gentiles, one of the things that was dividing them was meats offered to idols. I've been to Corinth in Greece, and when you stand there at Gallio's seat, it's mentioned in the book of Acts, you right in front of you is a large temple. And right down behind the temple is a little road that goes out to the sea. And off the back of the temple are these booths that are there. And these booths are where they sold meats that were offered to idols. So people would come and sacrifice their animals at this altar. They would give it to the priest and they would be sacrificed. Well, they would take this meat and they would just kind of drop it off the back side there and put it in these little vending places. And if you wanted a really good steak, I mean, that was they were sacrificing the best they had. They had taken kind of a page out of the children of Israel, in all honesty. A lot of the other religions had. And when they would come, they would give their best animals. So they would take that really, really good meat, and they wouldn't let it go to waste, and they would put it down. And so there was a place that you could buy meats that were offered to idols. Well, right across the street was another section of booths. And that was just right across. I mean, it was not very far at all. It's just right across the street. They faced each other. There was another set of booths, and this set of booths is where if I was a farmer or I was a shepherd then I could bring my food in, my meat in, and I could sell it over here. Well, they were having this big controversy because there were people who had been converted to Christianity who had spent their life offering animals at that altar. And now they were repulsed by the idea. Absolutely repulsed by the idea. I have given up that lifestyle. I have gone away from that. I am a Christian. I am not going to eat the meat that's offered to idols. Well, there's like a 3-chapter answer to this question, because what Paul's going to say is we know that there's no such thing as another God. We know that basically what he's saying is there's nothing wrong with eating the meat. It's just meat. I mean, just because they thought it was offered to an idol doesn't mean it really was. If you want to eat that, then eat it. But don't let it cause a division. Don't let it be one of those things where you're rubbing it in the other person's face. If they say that it is a problem for them, then don't eat it. And that's where he says, if it's going to cause you to stumble, I'll never eat meat again. I use this passage when COVID happened with all the face mask issue. And I remember I was at Foot Street at Corinth, and we were having controversy because some people wanted the mask and some people didn't. And I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the way Paul would have dealt with it, and he says, I'm not going to eat meat because that's going to offend you. Our concept is we're going to do whatever's going to keep us unified. If you need me to wear 5 masks to make you come, I'm not going to try to tell you that you aren't important to me by not wearing this. And we had no controversy over it because we looked at it from this passage. I know we weren't the only ones that did that. There were a lot that did. But in the middle of this, he's telling them, you've got to look at the big picture here. You are just trying to be right about this. You're trying to be right. You're trying to get your way. You're trying to prove your point. Some people there are just saying, you know what? Hey, guess where I got this? I got this on the backside of the temple there, and I'm going to eat it. I made a sandwich out of that. And knowing that other people thought that was wrong, and it was bringing all this division. So he starts talking to them, and it almost seems like it's out of the blue until you realize what he's doing. He all of a sudden starts saying, I want you to think about the children of Israel, and I want you to think about all the ways they messed up along the way. I want you to think about how they refused to take the promised land. I want you to think about, and in chapter 10, he gives this big exhortation. We'll look at it for just a second. Chapter 10, verse 1 of 1 Corinthians, he says, Moreover, brethren, I don't want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But verse 5, But with most of them God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples, to the intent that we, 1, should not lust after evil things as they lusted, and 2, do not become idolaters, and do not become idolaters as were some of them. As it's written, the people sat down and ate and drank and rose up to play. The third one, verse 8, Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 fell. The fourth one, verse 9, Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed by serpents. The fifth one, verse 10, Nor complain. And if you notice, these kind of get a little bit more narrow. They start real broad, and then they get real narrow. Don't even be complaining. Now he's going to say, verse 11, Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Verse 12, Therefore let him who thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. That is a verse that's very important, and I wish we had some time to talk about that, but I'm going to run out of time pretty quick. He's saying, don't ever let your guard down. Because about the time you feel like you've got Christianity under control, that's when the temptations come, and they come strong. And that's when we fall. But then this amazing verse, no temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man. He says every single thing that you're dealing with, someone has dealt with before. You have no new temptation. You have now it may be packaged a little different. It may be unique for your situation. It may be more readily available than it has been, whatever the case is, but you aren't no temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man. But God is faithful. There aren't that many times in the Bible where it says God is faithful. It talks about His faithfulness. But when it comes right out and says, but God is faithful, whatever it is that it says He's faithful to do, you can be 100% assured that it is right and will happen. If it says that God is faithful to do something, you can know that that's going to happen. So in this passage, he says, no temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. So God promises you that He's not going to let you be pushed beyond what you can say no to. That's a promise from God. You will not be pushed further than you can handle. God will not allow you, whether that is He will not allow Satan or whatever the situation is, He will not allow you to be forced into a situation where you have no other option but to sin. And that's because God wants success at the moment of decision. So His first promise in this is, will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. Second one is, but with each temptation will make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. Third. So first of all, every single temptation that we have, every time we have a right or wrong decision to make, God will ensure that it will not be too hard for you to make. It may be hard, but the right decision will be makeable. Now here's the problem with temptation and things like this. The more bad decisions we make, the further back in the cave we get and the further from the light we are. And sometimes getting ourselves back out of the cave is much more difficult. But God says, I promise you, there will always be at least one right decision available. So, if God promises a way of escape, if God always promises a way of escape, then first of all, I'm going to have to want to find it. You're drawn away by your own desires and enticed. Well, what is my desire? Is my desire to please God? Is my desire to please myself? So in the moment of temptation, I have to tell myself, I want to identify, this is a temptation. This is a right or wrong decision to be made. Let's identify it. Let's call it what it is. Now, I have to want to find it, and second of all, I got to look for it. Because it may not always be very obvious. But this is 100% the promise that God gives. Every time I have a right or wrong decision to make, God promises that a right decision will be available, that it will not be too hard for me to deal with, and that I can bear whatever comes with it. That's not always going to look like we think it's going to look. May not always feel like we think it's going to feel. But if I can walk through my life saying this, God wants me to be successful at the moment of decision. Where is the right door to go through? You'll find it. Because He promises that it's going to be there. Oh, no. I used to direct a church camp in Middle Tennessee, and it was at Fall Creek Falls State Park. If any of you ever been there, and the way the camp was set up was there was a big field kind of in the middle of the camp, and there were some guys' cabins down one side and then some girls' cabins down the other. And when you look down the side where the girls were, there was a road that went down through there, and that little road went down to a creek down there. When we got down, if you went down that creek, there was a flat area in the creek where if we had any baptisms, that's where we would take everybody. So one afternoon at camp, we had 2 or 3 young people that wanted to be baptized. So we took the whole camp down that little road, and we got down to that area where we were having our baptisms, where the water was kind of shallow. And we had some of our college students who were there, and they were some really good kids. And they went down, you go down the creek just a little bit and go across this little bridge and come up on the other side. And so because there were so many people there, a lot of times they would kind of go down, go across the bridge, and come back up. And so we had our baptisms, and I told everybody to go back to camp and what to do and what to get ready for and what we were going to be doing next. And so they all went back up. Well, as I was getting dried off, I turned around and looked across the creek, and all of our college kids were in a big circle around something over there. And so I thought, I'm going to go over here and see what they're doing. So I go down, I go across that little bridge, and I come up. And as I come walking up, I see what they're in a big circle around, and it's a huge turtle. And I thought about the turtle when I came in and saw the ant out here, because, I mean, this was like the biggest turtle I'd ever seen in the wild. I had gone to the zoo before and seen big turtles. I'd seen big turtles on TV, but I'd never seen a really big turtle just out somewhere. And to be honest with you, I didn't know a whole lot about turtles. I had a little turtle when I was younger. We had got it at the lake one day, and I named it Flash, and I forgot to feed it, and it died. Like, that was it. That's all I knew about turtles. And so as I'm walking up, I see this turtle, and it's like already like burrowing itself down into the ground, and it's kind of looking around. And I told someone, I said, hey, somebody pick that turtle up. Let's pick that turtle up. Let's just take it back. This will be the year we had the turtle, you know, like it'll be our mascot for camp. And they all went, well, I'm not touching that turtle. And I said, what's wrong with y'all? Somebody pick that turtle up. And they said, man, you want the turtle? You pick it up yourself. And I said, get out of my way. And so I walked over, and I leaned down, and I come up behind the turtle, and I put my hands under its shell, and I picked it up. Man, I learned a whole lot about turtles that day. A whole lot I didn't know. I always thought they had little bitty short necks. Oh, no. No, they got big long necks. I now know why they call them snapping turtles. I didn't know that at the time. I just thought they called them snapping turtles because that was a cute name for a turtle. Oh, no. They call them snapping turtles because they want to eat your face off. That's why. Because what happened was as I got under that turtle and I went to pick it up, it lunged. Like it lunged. And when it lunged, it's that big old head came out of that shell, and its head was upside down. Our eyes met. I saw all the way down into its soul. I saw what it ate for lunch. I mean, I saw a whole lot more about that turtle than I wanted to see, and I saw that mouth open up. And I mean, when that thing crashed in my face, I just thought, this might be the end. This might be over. And so I just dropped the turtle and turned around and walked away. And I learned, like I said, I learned a lot about turtles that day that I will never, ever forget. And I'm really glad that it didn't grab a hold of me, because I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't look the same as I do right now. Which may have been better, I don't know. But the reason I even tell you that story is because, here's the deal. Here's the way things in life go. Sometimes we feel like everything's okay and we're in control. We feel like everything is exactly the way it ought to be. We're cruising along. Everything is just fine. And then all of a sudden, we find ourselves a hold of something we never meant to grab. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12 says, let him who thinks he stand take heed lest he fall. What he means is don't let your guard down even if you think you have things under control. But then verse 13 says, no temptation is overtaking you except such as common to man. But God is faithful and not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. With each temptation will make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it. Here's the idea. It's a lot of words. Here's the idea. Sometimes we feel good about things and we find ourselves in situations we never meant to be in. God is faithful to help us get out of those situations. And He's also faithful to help us to avoid them at the beginning. We extend the invitation right now a lot out of convenience. There's a lot of discussion going on as to whether or not we should do away with the invitation. I know several churches now that they say, we're just not going to do an invitation anymore. It may not be that we have anybody here that wants to be baptized tonight. If you came forward, we might want to study with you. It may be that everybody here is in great standing with God. It's completely possible that we have a bunch of faithful people here tonight. But I think one of the great benefits of us extending the invitation is to remind you that the door is always open, and to maintain an attitude and an atmosphere that your spiritual well-being is important. So if the invitation does nothing else but remind us that this is the place where you belong, and this is the place where we want what's best for you, and this is the place that when you're struggling you can come, and we love you and care about you, then it's worth extending. So if we can help you in any way tonight, let us know how as we stand and sing this song.